Well, a big day in federal politics today as Treasurer Josh Frydenberg delivered an economic outlook, and trade tensions with China has taken another turn as China moves to suspend imports from 4 Australian abattoirs, citing labelling issues. Here to discuss the latest, I'm joined by Sky News host and News Corp columnist Peta Credlin. Well, Peter, a big day. What are your thoughts on the Chinese becoming even more hairy-chested with this so-called technical labelling issue, now suspending the way in which we do business with 4 of our major abattoirs and China?
Look, I think it's a real concern. I think anyone who is in agriculture, who's done it tough with the drought and all the other issues in recent times, has seen these free trade agreements as a real light, a real opportunity to get agricultural profits up and jobs up in the bush. And this is a real hammer blow. I mean, no one believes for a minute, do they, that these are, labelling issues, just like we don't believe that there were any issues with our barley, and we don't believe claims of adulteration on other product as well. China doesn't see its commercial arm different from its national security arm. It's one and the same beast for a Communist Party country like China. We will have lines between our strategic view of a country like China. We'll be tough on the position of the South China Sea, but we also want to do business. We want our winemakers to profit. We want our beef growers to profit. We don't use retaliation from one for the other, but they do. And I think this is now the understanding Australians, I think, are getting about China. They're understanding it better now, perhaps than they ever have before. And polls out today say 80% plus of Australians say that out of this virus, doing a bit of a Josh Frydenberg here, that out of this virus, China have not been straight with the world.
Peter, looks like Daniel Andrews has finally come out of his hibernation. He's announced some school measures today. He's been easily the most tardiest of all the state leaders and territory leaders when it comes to trying to get his state out of this economic implications attached to the coronavirus. I think it'll hurt him politically. What do you think?
I think it'll hurt him politically if the opposition can land a blow. But I mean, you tell me, in most of our states and territories, you asked a punter in the street, I mean, who is the opposition leader? Most of them wouldn't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but unless it's right in the middle of an election period, most people don't have more than 1 or 2 government ministers they can name, let alone the opposition. And this is the challenge for opposition in a very crowded information market where people have got more on their phones and Facebook than ever before. But their lack of just general knowledge and engagement in current affairs has fallen away. I do think he wouldn't have been able to hold Victorians much longer. I mean, I drove around a fair bit on Saturday going to the supermarket, things like that. And I noticed there were more people on the street than ever before, certainly in the last sort of 7 or 8 weeks. And a lot of people inside the shopping centre that I was at, and just general activity. And I think Victorians were looking at what was happening in the NT, Queensland, some small movements in New South Wales, and they were not having a bar of the continued lockdown. So I think they voted with their feet on the weekend, and he was smart enough to realise that today.
Well, we've got Dan T, and very shortly we'll ask him about his thoughts on that. Look, Jackie Trad, rooster to feather duster in the space of 72 hours. She's now, that albatross around Anastasia Palaszczuk's neck has gone. There are some within the Labor Party, maybe it's wishful thinking, who believe that her out of the way will now improve their prospects. But this has been a government that's been racked by integrity scandal after integrity scandal, and she's now sort of out of the way. But it's been a tumultuous period for not just the Labor Party, but Jackie Trad herself.
Well, the interesting thing is, are people going to put the question to the Premier to declare that if she is re-elected, that Jackie Trad will not return to the Cabinet? She will not return to the front bench. Will she return to a position of power?
She wouldn't answer that, Peter.
Well, this is the point, right? So who's got the most factional warlords inside the party room, or the caucus in the case of the Labor Party? It's Jackie Trad's left faction, considerably more than Palaszczuk's right faction. So who believes that if Anastasia Palaszczuk wasn't returned, she was to be returned in October, who would believe that there would not be a return of trade, that trade, if not necessarily out there in lights, was in pulling the strings and controlling the Premier, as arguably she's done today. I don't think anyone believes the puppet and the puppet master here, and I think that's where the opposition, if they want to make up some ground and credibility, I think, with Queenslanders, they need to focus on that and also say how they would be different.
Yes, no, 100%. It's a very good point. Now, we saw today Josh Frydenberg a coughing fit. He's now being tested for COVID-19, but he indicated in that statement that the government wasn't an endless money tree. There are also moves. Jason Falinski's come out this afternoon and suggested that we should look at bringing forward the 6-month period for job seeker and job keeper. What are your thoughts?
I think it's smart to have a debate about should there be a recalibration. All of these settings were put in place when we thought the death toll would be higher and that the impact of Australia standing down in lockdown would be longer. The Prime Minister himself said 6 months. I think he was under-promising and over-delivering. I think he never thought it would be 6 months, but he gave himself some wriggle room. So all the parameters were set on the basis of Armageddon. Well, we certainly are not in Armageddon, so I think some of the spending has to be back on the table to be reined in. We can't afford the expenditure we've put into a pandemic that we didn't have. So let's bring it back in. I think Falinski's right, particularly in relation to the job seeker payment, which is the dole, the double dole, because you can guarantee 6 months down the track of people getting double the New Start allowance, it will be politically nigh on impossible at that stage to bring it back. Do you know we are still paying the carbon tax compensation as taxpayers to people on welfare that 5 years ago we pulled away with the carbon tax? So there's no carbon tax, but there is the carbon tax compensation because we could never get it through the Senate to take away the compensation even after we'd taken away the tax.
Well, Peter, today's been an historic day at Macquarie Radio. Of course, your friend and colleague, Jones and Credlin, which follows this particular show tonight, comes to you exclusively to Sky News. But, of course, he's brought down the end of a 35-year career today. Massive tributes and plaudits from many within the industry. I believe John Laws called him this morning. Ben Fordham will, of course, take over the breakfast slot on 2GB. How will Australians remember the radio career of Alan Jones?
Well, whether they liked him or they didn't, and there were a lot of people like me who loved and admired him and a lot who threw brickbats at him, he had incredible stamina, 35 years, starts at 2:30 in the morning, on air at 5:30, absolutely across his brief, able to take on any politician if they weren't across the detail, and an enormous capacity. Like, it's one thing at the end of the day to make an assessment on the news of the day and where things are going, because everyone has been exposed all day putting their opinions out there. Bloody hard to pick it at 5:30 in the morning. So he had to rely so much on his gut and his own sort of fundamentals and what he believed was a right or wrong thing for Australia. And I think that there's been none better, and I don't think we'll see his like again. I mean, he's a true polymath. I mean, who coaches Australia to a rugby win and goes to Oxford and is a speechwriter for a politician and is Australia's longest ever winning broadcaster? I mean, that is an extraordinary achievement, Gleeson. And I say this as someone who's known him now for a long time. If he is in your corner, you have no better warrior. I mean, he's been an extraordinary mate and mentor to me. All this rubbish about Alan Jones and his position on women, he judges the person. He judges the person, and he has been just tremendous for the centre-right of politics, because if you were down and out or you felt like no one was there to give you a voice, he would be your advocate. And he knew his way around government. He does know, he hasn't passed away or anything. He knows his way around government. He'll be still here on Sky. But he could take up a problem and he'd want to fix it. He wouldn't just bang the drum about it and bleat about it and complain and say the government should do this or not do that. He would want a resolution for the little person at the end. And I think that the son of a battler dairy farmer, despite all of his great successes, is very much still the man that Alan Jones is today.
Well said, Peter Credlin, well said, and thank you for joining us tonight on Sky News across Australia. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Gleeson.